been in this series over the last 2 months talking about living outwardly. We've been wrestling with this one passage from 1 Corinthians 9 where the Apostle Paul talks about his decision. He really defends his decision to live his life in a radically outward way, orienting the course of his life towards serving others, choosing to identify across cultural barriers, circumstantial differences, to identify with people, to come alongside them. To the Jew, I became a Jew, Paul says. To the one without the law, I became without the law. To the weak, I became weak. This radical choice to identify and build bridges with people rather than barriers. To love authentically, as we talked about, to love incarnationally, not just in thought and word, but in flesh and blood, in action and service and sacrifice. Paul has to defend this choice of living this way to a church that he's planted and loved and built up, because some have come in amongst them and influenced them that a real leader doesn't act that way. That a real leader kind of takes control and uses their authority like a stick and whips people into shape and marches them along. And somehow Paul is made to appear in their eyes as weak because of his choice and his commitment to kindness and love and service and patience and all of the things that he believes so profoundly that God has shown to him and that he ought to show to other people. Now, we've been wrestling with this for 2 months. And in the course of our series, we've had 2 invited guests in who've both, they have spoken from and modeled for us what it means to live an outward life. We had Fred Heron, the pastor of the Vineyard Church in North Kansas City, with us. And that's a church that he's led and, that he initially planted and built by knocking on doors and talking to people and sharing his faith and loving his neighbor. Last weekend, we had Danielle Strickland with us. And I know Danielle told some stories, but she didn't really tell you about her life because I'm sure she feels like that's, uncomfortable or bragging. But she and her husband and their 3 sons have moved into some of the most difficult kind of urban slums in several parts of the world. They've occupied kind of tiny living spaces in those slums, and they have ministered to people and identified with them in incarnational love and radical service in an effective way. Right now, Danielle and her husband lead a congregation of people that's made up of mostly First Nations Canadians, the people originally in that land. And like